Welcome to the SAG-AFTRA Foundation's Conversations at Home program. I'm Jenelle Riley with Variety. Before we're joined by today's guests, I want to let you know that the SAG-AFTRA Foundation is a nonprofit organization that relies entirely on donations to provide emergency assistance and free educational programs to SAG-AFTRA artists. This conversation today is made possible thanks to the generosity of our supporters. Over the past year, the foundation has given nearly $7 million in COVID relief to more than 7,000 performers. So if you are a SAG-AFTRA artist and you need help, please ask. And if you can help, please give. Information can be found in the description of this video. Thank you for your support. And now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce from the morning show, Mark Duplass, Greta Lee, and Karen Pittman. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
This is an audience of your fellow SAG-AFTRA actors, so I actually always like to start by asking, how did you get your SAG card? And Mark, I know I've asked this of you before, but I actually can't remember.
I had a weird journey to getting my SAG card because a lot of the first stuff I did, we were just like kids, like making stuff with our video cameras, and we didn't know anything. So, even The Puffy Chair, my first feature, wasn't a SAG movie. We didn't even know what we were doing. And then when I did Hump Day, even later, I think I was still Taft-Hartley'd into that. So I think it was a movie called True Adolescence that I did. That was like official SAG job that I actually got paid for.
I got my SAG card as a New York actor doing Law and Order. But I did all of the Law and Orders. So my very first Law and Order was with Anthony Anderson. I remember it very clearly. And that's how I got my SAG card.
Were you a suspect or a killer or a witness?
Don't blow it. Don't tell her.
Good question.
Spoiler alert.
It's a very good question. No, I was like a social worker. I think I was a social worker and I had good info on one of the suspects. So that was how I came into my SAG card. It was a big deal. It was a really big deal for me. I remember when I got my first ballot for, voting for the SAG Awards. I remember my mother paid my SAG membership, my first, initiation fee. And she was sure that she should have been deciding who the awards went to and not me, because she paid for the initiation fee. Which
I love that. And Greta, for you?
Yeah, I just had to look it up. And I too, Law and Order SVU for me. That was my first gig. It was an episode called Taboo. It was about incest. And which was a real fun thing to explain to my Korean American parents. So they're so proud. Very popular episode. I still get residuals. I'm proud to say. But yeah, that was my first job and it was a really big deal. I invited all my friends over and put out chips. And I think 80% of the scenes that I shot were cut, but yeah, but it was amazing. I was so proud. I made them stay through the very end, to the end of the credits. And I was like, yeah, I made it, you guys. That's
awesome. And now here we are with the morning show. I actually want to go back and start at the beginning because Mark and Karen, you were part of season 1. And I believe you were about to start filming season 2 when the pandemic shut things down. At what point did you know what would be happening in season 2 and that, COVID-19 would actually be part of the story?
I think, Karen, we shut down shooting around episode 2 of the first.
March.
Yeah.
Like right in the middle. Yeah, it was like the middle of episode 2, middle of it.
So we shot some stuff that no one has ever seen and no one will ever see. And then the writers, as they are wont to do, kind of went back to the drawing board and they decided that, they wanted to incorporate COVID into this storyline because this really is such a current events show. And I think that, they were pretty exhausted because they had to do this in season 1 when, the Me Too movement hit. They really felt like they needed to incorporate that movement. So they went and rewrote all those scripts before production. So They haven't yet had a season that hasn't been thrown overboard right before shooting.
They've written 4 seasons, basically, right? I filmed all this stuff with Billy, actually, where originally, and again, this is also stuff that no one ever saw, but originally they were showing the very first meeting between Corey Ellison and Stella Block, where he approaches her. He poaches her at this in Williamsburg at this like taco truck smorgasbord event. It was hilarious. It was like,
I want to see that shit.
I know. I know. I want to see that. I want to see it too. It was so fun. And it was all, Stella I think in the script it said, Stella is not impressed with this white guy. It was really, it was so fun to shoot. But then we got shut down, right? And then everything got tossed out and we didn't know what was happening. And we reconvened months later. Wow. It was a while.
I wanted to say it was really great in a lot of ways. It got thrown out, but I think we all as actors, we got a good sort of backstory for what happened between that moment when Alex Levy leaves the show and then we come back to the morning show, several months later. Like we actually could use all that stuff that we filmed in that short span of time in February and the very beginning of March as a way to know who our characters were when we actually came back in October of 2020 to shoot what is now referred to in my mind as a morning show 2.1.
And Apple was super happy to pay billions of dollars so that we could shoot that backstory and never use it.
Really excited too.
Very pleased with that.
Yeah.
Greta, Stella is a new addition to season 2. I'm curious, were you a fan of the show when the role came your way, and what appealed to you about joining this cast?
Yes, I was a fan of the show. I was a really big fan of the show. I was a really big fan of all of these people. And it was one of those things where I was not expecting, it wasn't the kind of show that I was expecting to have the opportunity to join, being an hour-long drama, because I was mostly coming from a half-hour comedy space. But I do remember reading the character description of this woman and the scenes, the the fake scenes that they had between Corey and Stella, and really just I was so excited about their vision for what they had for this woman coming in. And then, my feelings for Billy Crudup, I was just such a fan of his from theater and starting out in New York. And I just seen him do his one-man show, and they asked me to fly out and do a chemistry test with him, which was so fun. I mean, I think I would rather see that if I could go back and see what that our read was like. I mean, it was hilarious. It was really, really, really funny. We improvised and we kind of got to make up on the spot what it would be like if the two of them met for the first time. And from the get-go, it was just really, there was so much there unexpectedly. I mean, we were playing with a lot. I mean, yes, there's the gender differences, the racial differences, but also the age gap and this generational divide, which in a lot of ways was more interesting than the other things, because she's this like self-proclaimed millennial and he is not. And so yeah, I mean, yeah, I was so excited. It seemed like these guys had a really good thing going. My main goal was try not to mess it up.
It sounds like there's a lot of great additional material that we don't get to see. I want them to put out these missing scenes and these chemistry reads online. You could make a whole separate show about it.
Yeah, I wanted to ask Mark actually what it was like, because I know in the stuff that I got to do with Jen, we got to improvise so much. Oh, wow. And I know, I knew in doing it, there's no way it was going to make it in, but we still did so much of it. And I was curious in watching you guys, how much of that came into play for you for your scenes.
They don't let me improvise.
Okay. Really? Come on. No, I know that's not true.
Jen and I do a fair amount of improvising. We don't go on side trails. We always stay on the trail of the script, but we mess around in there to try and, just make it feel more natural when we can and get little surprises. And I think that's, one of her biggest strengths, honestly, is being like one of, America, arguably the world's biggest movie stars, but she's still kind of like a little kid who's nervous and worried she's going to suck and trying to find it, and very, very genuinely not on her feet and or resting on her laurels in any way, and that's, I just love doing scenes with her because of that.
And I love the dynamic between Alex and Charlie this season. And I'm curious, particularly the fight you have in the car. What is it? Is it fun even when you're doing scenes where you're fighting with each other?
For me, it is. I mean, that one was a little traumatic because of all the things that we say to each other. But Jen and I have such a good relationship. We have a good working relationship. We have a good friendship. We have a lot of affection for each other. So it feels safe for us to be able to do that. I mean, we were definitely holding hands and apologizing to each other after each take. But that scene in particular went very quickly. We shot that on a sound stage with, all the stuff, the car is parked and there's rear projection going all around us. And we have like 4 or 5 cameras going at once. And it was a request because, those scenes tend to happen quickly. I know this. And a lot of actors who are watching this, a lot of times when you have a big emotional scene, it's 5 or 6 pages, they'll schedule like 7 hours for it. And then you get in there and everybody's done in 42 minutes because you're spent and the energy comes fast and hard. And that's one thing that Jen really requested is like, Mark and I improvise. This is going to go quickly, put a bunch of cameras on it. And so we really only did a few takes of that. And we really wanted it to be overlappy and all that stuff that makes it messy and real.
It felt almost too real. I almost had to look away at one point. Greta and Karen, both Stella and Mia acknowledge the gender and racial inequalities at UBA, but they're also a part of the system. I'm sort of curious if you had any input into those scenes, or when you read them, how much they resonated with both of you.
Yeah, we had input. I had input, and a lot of that was because as a human being, we were coming out of this pandemic, but also I really felt compelled to influence the storyline around race and race politics because of what we had experienced with all of the protests and, what was happening in 2020 with George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor. And typically as an actor, I try to lean back from being in a lot of conversation with the writers and producers about the arc of the character, only because I, as an actor, like to be in the space of finding out what the imagination of the writer is for the character versus what I want. But in 2020, I really felt like if we were going to have conversations around race and race dynamics in the workplace, I wanted to be a part of how that unfolded for the arc of my character. And so behind the scenes, Greta and I did talk a lot about the nuanced conversation around race that could happen in the morning show. Like, what would it look like for a Black woman to be making these decisions, but also what it would look like for, a woman who has more proximity to whiteness in Stella Bach, what that looked like for that character, and what it looked like for Deshaun Terry, Daniel Henderson's character, as we navigated that. As women who were making decisions. And you saw that in that scene where we were talking about the it factor. And, we poured over those scenes emotionally. What was that going to, how we were going to interpret that later on and how it would unfold in the season for Daniel we talked a lot about that.
Yeah. I mean, given the time that we were shooting in, there was no way to pretend that we weren't rethinking and reconsidering everything. I mean, in our personal lives and in the workspace, truly every facet of our lives. And it definitely fed into our work. And just given the nature of what we were doing and how we were working, because we were together on set in a time when we were basically quarantining and not seeing anyone else. And it turned into, that's like a nice byproduct of how hard it was. But having this group to talk about social justice and what was happening and our responsibilities in terms of being artists and how do we make an impact? And is it being for me? the responsibility of being Asian American and showing up and having this opportunity to play Stella Bach, this boss character, when that we don't get to see it that much. And what does that mean, though? Is it enough just to show up and say, hi, I'm here? But what else? And I'm so grateful to all of my castmates and also this team. Everyone was so receptive to not just ideas, but just wanting to talk at all about all of this. And I hope that audiences can feel the effect of what was going on for us on set while we were working.
The challenge for it, I think, was how to have a constructive conversation about it. That so much of my experience as a human being, having gone through 2020, was that I was still dealing with a good amount of real internal rage, anger, hostility towards what I was experiencing as a Black woman, and how to come to the character that I have a real conversation around race and race politics in that kind of environment, and not, sort of feel quite angry and resentful in the process of creating the story. I think most African-American actors will talk about their individual experiences on set and how they deal with their own feelings around race and being Black, but especially being in environments that are predominantly white, and what that feels like and what that looks like, and how to influence the experience without taking on everything that the character is doing, and what your own personal feelings about. Like, it was just like a whole soup. And I think that Carrie and the writers and the producers really tried to come at a nuanced story around what that looked like. I think we did a really good job of that.
I absolutely think so. I thought it was a fantastic season. And Greta, Stella has to deal with anti-Asian hate when she's basically verbally attacked in the street over, with the term China virus. I'm kind of curious, do the writers give you a heads up when something like that is coming? Do you find out about it in the script? And what did it mean to you to get to play scenes like that?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. It's all so complicated and tricky, right? That balance of wanting to be authentic and show things, to show truth, what's happening, but also within the context of a TV show, right? I mean, that's always the question, that's the challenge for us. And with that in particular, I mean, that it was no different with that. I think organically, because of the time that we were shooting, stories were coming up. And I remember having conversations with Carrie during our break and just catching up and talking about what was going on. And certain things came up, including, events that were happening in the world, tragic, horrible events. And so the writers did at one point approach the idea of including it into this season. And I have to say, admittedly, I was not sure. I didn't know. I mean, I'm just going to be blunt. I didn't know if it was a good idea to do it in the context of the morning show, or in the context of what is ultimately, at the end of the day, supposed to be entertainment on some level. And for me to carry on that responsibility to just felt really overwhelming. And yet I also knew it would be lying if we didn't include it, given everything else that we were able to include on a show that is so prescient, like the show. We had to. And so, I mean, I think I had some very conflicting feelings about it, and was open in discussing it, not just with the creative team, but with the rest of the cast. Because it wasn't also just me in that particular issue. The same thing could be true about so many of the issues that the show was tackling this season. They gave me a heads up. It was dealt, I thought, with the utmost grace and a delicate sense of wanting to be honest, and and take that responsibility seriously in terms of what that topic is and was. I have no idea if I answered your question.
No, absolutely. And it was incredibly honest. And I don't want to say funny, but in the way that life is funny, she says, I'm not even Chinese.
Yeah.
Which is something that I know a lot of my friends and family kind of had to deal with. Like, that's not the point, but also like you're wrong on so many levels.
The way that it worked in tandem with the rest of what was going on with Stella, I thought was great in showing that, yes, you can have a female, a woman of color in a position of power who has a certain type of agenda. And yet you can also see that she herself in her personal life it is absolutely faced with the same kinds of challenges that other people are. And that there's something very humanizing of seeing that happened to her, the sort of status change, and seeing what happened to her on the street that day.
Absolutely. Karen, did you want to add to that?
It's one of those situations that where you hear some sort of terrible epithet or what have you is thrown at you. That's probably the most inflammatory experience of racism that you could experience as a person of color in this country. And I do think that sort of pulls audiences out of it. So I certainly was like, had a real sense of skepticism about how that moment was going to play out. But when I saw it on screen in the episode, I thought, oh, wow, this is really important. And as Greta was saying, I think it was really important for it to be seen. I thought it had a real resonance in the moment for me. It actually expanded the conversation of what the experience of that character was, of what Stella Bach was, and what she likely was feeling in all the moments of having to walk around and be the boss, but also just be a regular human being. It just brought such humanity and expanded the conversation of who she was.
I love that the whole season is out and available because I love being able to talk about these specific scenes. Mark, one of the most talked about scenes is in the finale. Charlie makes a decision to say he has COVID so that he can help Alex. Again, did you have a heads up about this, or what did you sort of think when you read that? Because I know people who think it's the most romantic gesture of all time. And then I know people who are so angry at him.
Yeah. I mean, it just depends how codependent you are, right? I think that's what it comes down to. I have a great relationship with Carrie and the writers, and even from the beginning of this sort of rewrite of this season, there was a discussion about leaning into the Chip and Alex relationship for a lot of the plotting for this season, which I was really, really happy to do. I just really love those smaller scenes and those two-person scenes, and I love working with Jen, and I love the sort of long range arc that we're building together in that story. So I wasn't surprised about that story element. To me, it is a natural extension of the same character that Chip has always been, which is he's usually makes pretty smart, well thought out decisions, except when it comes to Alex, and while I personally would never do that, what he does at that final episode, it felt right for me that Chip would do that, honestly. And you see him get into this ostensibly healthy relationship with Madeline, his girlfriend, and kind of chuck that to the side in the face of his addiction, I think, to that push and pull of Alex, which I think a lot of people can identify with. And, I think there's a self-destructive element to him when it comes to her. And I think there's a feeling of, if she's going someplace bad, I want to go there with her, so he's a real ride or die in that way.
It's funny that you refer to him as Chip, because to me, he's such a Charlie. And I know everyone on the show calls him Chip, but for a second I was like, wait, did I get his name completely wrong?
Yeah.
The ensemble really is so wonderful. And you talked about, being back on set and working with each other during the pandemic while your characters are working with each other during the pandemic. Did you find that it was, really, I don't want to say fun again, but like, it was great to be back and on that atmosphere? Or was there a part of any of you that like wanted to be with Steve Carell in Italy? Like, he got to go off to like a really nice location and shoot.
Well, we knew he wasn't really in Italy.
I wondered about that. I wondered if he was, in Van Nuys somewhere.
Pasadena is beautiful that time of year.
It is gorgeous.
But
really good food.
Yeah.
I mean, I will just say, I can't speak for anyone else, but like this group is, I think if you're an actor, I don't know how much better it gets than this group, because this group is, for me coming in, I didn't really know what to expect, but I knew that everyone was going to be, on their A game. But I think the thing that I was surprised was everyone loves acting so much. They do. And in between takes, it was, a lot of time just talking about craft in like a supremely nerdy way. And that was surprising to me. All the conversations with Billy about okay, what is realism and how do we balance that with something more heightened? And, talking to Nestor about, his heroes and how do we bring that into the work we do, or, and in different scenes that we did. And Karen, I remember you staying to watch some of the scenes that I did early on, just to be there. And I learned so much from watching and working with Karen, your use of your voice, your vocal instrument, and our conversations about, having a background in singing and what does that mean to be a performer, how to bring that into what you do. And watching Mark that one day where he was like, oh, I have an idea, I'm going to barf. And I was like, oh my God, seriously? No. I was like, there's no way he was so serious. And then I was so jealous. I was like, oh, damn, I want to barf.
And
that's amazing.
In your second season, you get to do one major excretion, and it is of your choice.
I guess so. So get ready, season 3. But that was so amazing to watch because, for me as an actor, I'm so overly concerned. We talked about this with whoever else was on set with, my costume. Oh no, I get so bogged down by the logistics of making a bold choice like that, of even asking, but I'm going to ruin my costume. And I don't know if there's double of this, this blazer, but watching the brazenness with which Mark was like, no, man, I think I should barf. And we all ran to this monitor and we took videos of it. And I don't know. It's just been so great to watch everyone.
It's a great crew. I think, I don't want to project onto Karen and Greta, but I've had enough conversations with the two of you guys to know that we all felt a little intimidated coming into this show. It's just massive movie stars and incredible actors wherever you turn. And so it felt like a little bit of a jump up for us to a certain degree of what's this going to be like? And to just piggyback on what Greta is saying, the amiability of everyone on this set, the openness has been incredible. And then the receptivity from the powers that be and the writers to those that aren't, the top 3 or 4 movie stars on the cast list, when they don't have to be, honestly, because they could just say you should be grateful to be here. Inclusion on all that stuff has been really very nice.
Yeah.
And Greta, you mentioned, you and Karen have these singing backgrounds, yet you guys have not sung on the show yet. We've had Deshawn this season and Billy in season 1. Who's going to sing in season 3?
I should not have brought that up. I really do not want to sing on the show. Karen, you got it. It's all you, girl. I will stand behind you and I will touch my heart out, but
I'm going to say straight up, I'm not singing. Mia does not sing. Karen sings. Mia does not sing. But I did want to say about the ensemble that I agree that with all of what Greta and what Mark were saying about it wasn't just about the cast being connected as an ensemble. It really was the crew stepped in. I mean, I think if you see people around you sort of connecting and staying connected, it creates a great respect for what actors do. And, again, between takes, Mark, in a scene that we did in episode 6, Mark was sitting with me as Mia was kind of stewing and sitting in this real mix of having found out that a book, an excerpt from the book was going to come out and possibly impugn her character and her career. And I remember having to sit with all of that emotion, but keep it in, which is what the character does a lot during the season 1 and season 2. And I just remember Mark sitting with me in Mia's office as she was sort of stewing, and what great company that was. And again, you know, sitting and watching Stella's takes or Greta's takes when she was working on something in episode 2. And the very end of the season, I came in to do a phone call with Deshaun. I read his side on set, and he came in and read my side on set. And, you know, it is that kind of work that you open up to after watching actors work all through season 1. But by the time you get to the end of the season, all the filming that we did, I think we did really bond up as an ensemble, as a group of people trying to tell a story in a difficult time. And so I just wanted to go back and say something about that, which I thought was important.
It's such a perfect cast from top to bottom. Everyone is so wonderfully cast, and you all work so well together. Is there anything you can tell us about season 3? You know, where your character might go, when we can see it, what the discussions are?
Well, we don't know yet if it's official. We hope, you know, that Apple still feels like we're worth it. We're promising them that we will try not to shut down after shooting 2 wasted episodes. Be more efficient this time. But that, yeah, I mean, it's kind of a wing and a prayer at this point.
Well, if nothing else, they should make a show with all this extra content you have. The morning show. Yeah.
It's like, how can we promise the network that we won't have some sort of like global catastrophe? How do we sweeten the deal and make them feel like they will only have to write 1 season and not scrap it and start from scratch?
I know. I think we're still in the global catastrophe of it all. Actually, I feel like it's a little bit.
Oh yeah.
Well, I enjoy the show so much. I would love to see where these characters go next. I want to thank you so much for joining us today, for talking to your fellow actors, for sharing your experiences and craft. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks,
Thanks for having us.